Classroom of the Elite Volume 11.5. Now usually a .5 volume is just kind of a somewhat filler afterwards. With no tension and just more usual jokes and almost no major change that lasts afterwards in the normal volumes. I mean, just for an example, the fact that Yamuchi confessed to Sakura in volume 4.5 and got rejected but was actually mature about it, is something that is treated like it never happened in the future volumes. But in this volume we got 3 major developments with 3 of the beloved waifus. Now talking about the first waifu that won the hearts of people, mainly only because of the anime. We start off with the monologue of Horikita Suzune thinking about her brother like usual. This time she actually talking to herself, well, her reflection in the mirror, to be honest, that only makes it more weirder though. And although it was kinda of cool and the thought behind it went quite deep, but it was still surprising to not see anyone point out this weird psychotic behavior. I mean, I half expected her to ask the mirror, who is the most beautiful woman in the world? But contrary, she actually said that she looked terrible. She didn't quite like what she was seeing. She contemplated about her relationship, her brother, how they are so closely related to each other, yet have such distance between them. A distance so big that she even had doubts seeing him off. It was her brother's last day in school, but it was understandable, her not having any expectations about there being a heartfelt farewell. I mean, Manabu's last words to Suzune before leaving the school could have also been something along the lines. "You're a disappointment," for all she knew. She also thinks upon the change she has gone through, but those previous changes were still insignificant to show her brother that she had truly grown. Of course that was her thinking. She knew that she had changed, but also thought it wouldn't even be worth mentioning to her brother. Although I have to say, after the class vote in volume 10, the distance between them had lessened. Suzune was at least able to face her brother and talk properly to him. She was able to hold herself together. When the farewell ceremony was ongoing, Suzune patiently observed her brother and also exchanged words with Nagumo. Talking about the ceremony, we learn the obvious fact that Manabu Horikita had won in his last special exam and managed to graduate from Class A. That would mean him winning over Nagumo. But the thing is, Nagumo talks as if he let Manabu win. Talking about how he never had any intention of standing in Manabu's path to graduate from Class A. In fact, he wished for him to graduate from Class A, since he was the only senior he respected and wanted to compete with. And I have to say, I believe him. Not saying that Manabu would have lost if Nagumo fully went all out against him, but rather that Nagumo didn't go all out against him in the end. He did get one win over him, and moreover Nagumo had plans for competing with him in the future. There was not much reason for him to go all out, at least that's what his characteristics hints at. Nagumo speaks about all this, in front of Suzune, Amulet-chan and Ayanokoji. And Amulet-chan points out the yaoi implications of it, pointing out the truth about second most popular yaoi ship in this series. The first of course being Hirata and Ayanokoji, and boy do we see that ship get flags in this volume. Anyway, back to the bro-con waifu Horikita Suzune. She acted quite the tsundere, telling Ayanokoji that she won't meet with her brother and then leaves the ceremony. But not before imprinting the scene of her brother graduating in her mind by staring creepily intensely at him talking with other girls, and his other classmates. Ayanokoji is left in between, with a girl who is acting weirdly tsundere for his taste and her brother who wants her to see him off. Ayanokoji doesn't need to meddle much this time. He presses the issue to Suzune, and when the day arrives for Manabu to leave the school, only Ayanokoji is there to see him off. Of course he wants Suzune there, so he stalls Manabu a bit, and then just at the last possible moment, just like the animes, or in fact any story, the heroine arrives. And this time a totally unseen Suzune arrives. Even the man with the unmovable heart, Ayanokoji, is surprised to see this new Suzune. And it turns out Suzune has cut her hair. And seeing that for the time in this series, we see Horikita Manabu smile a genuine happy smile. It was as if he knew exactly what was going on through her head. As it turns out, there is a deeper meaning behind Horikita Suzune having those long high-maintenance hair. Manabu Horikita was a child prodigy and a child with keen insight. And with his sharp eyes he quickly saw through this creature his mother had plopped down and learned about 2 important facts. First, that Suzune had incredible potential. He saw her as a diamond in rough, someone who would someday surpass even him. Of course it immensely interested Manabu, he even looked forward to it. To see how far could his sister go. Second fact he learned about her, was that his sister is a bro-con. This bastard knew exactly what kind of affect he was having on her sister and how his sister felt about him. Since a kid he could see that this little creature was too fixated with him. And he didn't like it. At all. So he decided to carry out a little experiment. He told her he liked long hair. Knowing that Suzune herself likes short hair. And voila, the very next moment Suzune decided to grow out her hair. Killing her own likes to gain her brother's favor. Of course Manabu decided to let it be and then years went by. And alas we see the real reason why in Volume 1 Manabu acted violently against Suzune. It was caused just from seeing her hair, he could see that she was still fixated with him. How she was still intimating him. How she had grown from the smiling kid she was in the past to an unemotional solidarity individual, just like her brother. Manabu never wished that of her. He never wanted her to be someone like him, or worse someone less accomplished than him. Moreover it was also around the time that Manabu had himself realized his only mistake in this school. His only regret, being unable to train someone to succeed him. Him not involving too much with others, which just gave him disadvantages against Nagumo. And so he wanted to change it. He wanted his sister to reach her full potential, to learn from this school and not make mistakes like him, to not confuse solidarity with independence. He didn't have much choice except taking drastic measures because even though years had passed, he couldn't see any change in her. At least that was the case until he met Ayanokoji, an unknown existence even he couldn't perceive. And then he began to have hope for Suzune. Hence he set up the meeting in the first place. And now he could finally see the change in her. He could finally see that she was back to the old her. The old her from way back in the past who smiled and liked to keep her hair short. He felt proud of her and happy for her. He also told her about his experiment to which they had a small laugh. The Horikita Suzune had changed now, could actually be differentiated from Yukinoshita at last. This was a good volume for Horikita stands, cause now the game had changed for them. Now whenever someone from another camp poked fun at her, if they ever said, "Man, this ex-girl is way better Horikita is just a bro-con," they could go. Objection! Then they had a well-received farewell and Suzune acted like all was fine but of course Ayanokoji isn't a freaking genius manipulator for nothing. He stayed and Suzune expressed her buried feelings about her brother leaving. She felt sad, she cried about how she would not be able to see her brother for 2 more years when they had just patches things up. That scene was very raw and humane. Of course she would be sad to see him go, it doesn't matter if things are turning for the better or if things ended up well, at last people grieve about the loss and it's just normal for feeling of grief at a loss way over the feeling of accomplishment. Moreover Suzune hadn't exactly found the real her, in fact only the kid her loved the short her, but what about the grown-up her who had changed from before, like was the nature of things. Then Ayanokoji and Horikita share kind of a moment after a long time in the volume. One had been ignoring the other and the distance between them was apparent in the previous volumes. It was after a long time that they had a meaningful scene with each other. And as someone who watched the anime first before reading the light novel, seeing scenes like that does give a certain happiness. Now before talking about the second waifu important thing I just want to talk about the foreshadowing in the conversation between Ayanokoji and Manabu. Manabu tells Ayanokoji to leave a mark on this school, to make people reminisce in a great way about him. And Ayanokoji does entertain such thoughts. He talks about overseeing the battle between the first year while improving their growth. I talked about in one of my video about Ayanokoji's future development but the thing is, him assisting in people's growth like of those of Horikita, Ryuin and Ichinose and then watch them duke it out. And how he would find that to be truly interesting, that sounds awfully lot like what his job would be in the White Room. I mean in White Room they need more people like Kiyotaka and he has to lead them. He has to help them grow and White Room's tough competition calls for all the kids there to compete with each other, to duke it out. Now I think I can talk about the second development with the second waifu, the recently lost and unusually depressed in this volume, the friendship-loving girl, Ichinose. Now after being brutally defeated by Ryu and going from Class B to Class C Ichinose was quite depressed. Since she was the leader she did bear responsibility, and since she was so close to her classmates she blamed herself more than anyone else. I mean not anyone in her class would blame her, in fact they would help her, at least on the surface. Kanzaki has acted very suspicious from the start. He is obviously not as nice as he looks but seeing as how Ryuin evaluated Kanzaki in the washroom, I would say that Kanzaki's two-facedness wouldn't be at as extreme level as Kushida's. And although he is getting buddy-buddy with Hashimoto they haven't really cut any deal. And Hashimoto himself doesn't seem to have that high of a evaluation of Kanzaki. Back to the topic of Ichinose, it felt like she was spiraling down the cycle of self-blame. When she met up with Horikita and Ayanokoji knowing that they would break off their alliance, Ichinose felt even more down because firstly, she could see that the Class D was getting more powerful. She even expressed her surprise when she realized how close of a match they had with Class A. They had to compete with them next and more than just worrying over the class's ability level, she also held reservations about facing off against Ayanokoji. The thing to note was that although Class B displayed good performance in all special exam, they just took losses left and right. I mean, you could say it was safe play, but they were the only one who didn't exactly strategize to win. Ichinose let people just get away with whatever they did to her in her class, so many times. Like with Nagumo exposing her information, Sakyongi exposing her as shoplifter, or letting Ryuan just carry on with his sneaky tactics which affected their class not even once but twice, in the festival in Volume 5 and the previous volume with him giving the students diarrhea. Not once did someone receive a serious backlash from plotting against Ichinose. In nicer terms you could say Ichinose is very kind, in a ruder but more practical way you could say she is a pushover. But Ichinose was beginning to realize that things couldn't go on much longer like this. If she continued being like this, she could never be at Ryuan, and Class D would catch up to them eventually. It made me seriously consider Ryuan's words when he said that Ichinose isn't suited to being a leader. I mean, I guess I get that. She is great at bringing people together, but she also influences them to do nicer, kinder things, and all they might have been great for a normal class. But with the cutthroat competition going on between the other classes, just being kind and not wishing bad for anyone else isn't gonna be enough. Anyway, Ichinose had lost her will to fight and was doubting her capabilities and whether she could ever really accomplish something for her class. And just like before, Ichinose sought for solace until she could figure things out. But Ayanokoji noticed this. After making a very interesting bet with Horikita. The bet was simple. Horikita and Ayanokoji would compete in the next written exam. Horikita could decide in which one subject they would compete and had the freedom to tell the subject they would compete in at any time before the exam. She could literally meet him 2 minutes before the exam is to be taken and say, maths. And then Ayanokoji had to get a perfect score in it. If Ayanokoji got any less, he would have to give his all from then onwards for the sake of class. If Ayanokoji won, he could make Horikita do anything. Of course, when the details were first made known, Horikita and the readers all had the doubts about anything. But regardless, Horikita accepted the bet, that she would do anything Ayanokoji wanted if she lost. She may have not agreed to that if she knew about the T-Rex and his most famous quote, "Spread your legs." But at the end, Ayanokoji, after his talk with Manabu, decided that he might as well regard Manabu's wishes, and also, for the sake of his own entertainment, decided that Horikita would have to join the student council if she lost. Anyway, then comes the moment between Ayanokoji Kiyotaka and Ichinose Honami. Ichinose was just letting herself drench in the rain and drown in her sorrow when Ayanokoji entered with the umbrella. Of course, Ichinose didn't want to cause any more trouble for him, since he had already helped her more than enough times. Typical anime girl behavior. But still cute. Ayanokoji insisted, and all he had to do was to soak in along with her to convince Ichinose to have a talk with her. Since they were so wet, Ayanokoji offered to go to his room to get sorted. And in there, Ayanokoji made an absolute Chad mood. Smooth and slick as frick, he offered a towel, a hot beverage, and made Ichinose's heart go racing as he gave her a newfound purpose to do well in exams. And that purpose he gave her was himself. Now they had gotten really close through the previous volume's emotional speaking. Moreover, Ichinose had obviously began to develop feelings for him. And our main character isn't a dense protagonist. He got close to her, physically speaking. Brushed her cheeks and even ran his fingers across her lips. I am pretty sure even Ichinose was expecting a kiss there. And she wouldn't have minded it. And this perv Koji calmly analyzed that she would let him kiss her. But then he didn't answer, just said that he wanted to see her again a year from now. It was a pretty direct way of saying that if she was still in the school a year from now, they would kiss and possibly do some more things. Ichinose did a cute blush. The whole scene seemed like big wholesome tease. Ichinose's spirit was once again mended. It wouldn't surprise me if after that Ichinose feels like Ayanokoji likes her. I mean, that was some clear-cut flirting. But then of course there is the plot. Now before we move on to the third development with another major beloved waifu, let me make some honorable mentions. Sakyongi Arisu. She had become a good friend of Ayanokoji and had her father's number prepared in advance to help Ayanokoji. Ayanokoji had some pretty informative talk with Mr. Sakyongi, and truth be told, Ayanokoji almost sounded boastful. He talked like a total badass, saying he doesn't need help to defeat Tsukishoro but rather to clean up the mess after he defeats Tsukishoro. It's almost like, call the ambulance, but not for me. And after convincing Mr. Sakyongi, he set up a meeting with Chabashira-sensei and Mishima-sensei. And in that meeting Sakyongi participated too, to help Ayanokoji. And that did help his case. I mean, all Chabashira-sensei had to know was that Ayanokoji didn't actually lose to Sakyongi to reignite her faith and help Ayanokoji with all her strength. Mishima-sensei needed just a bit more nudge, but he was self-righteous and decided to help him soon enough. And an important alliance was formed which would henceforth oppose Tsukishiro. Then there is Hiriori, the much-beloved character for some weird reason. It seems like the plot armor doesn't work on her and she had figured out that Ayanokoji is the one who has defeated Ryuan, which is pretty big deal considering even Horikita hasn't figured that out. Although she seems to have some doubts and Hiriori got some more clues sent her way. But still pretty smart of her. She has always been a pretty useful character for her class. They meet up because basically Ayanokoji asked her out for a cup of coffee. Where they encounter Kei, who is pretty jealous to see them, something Ayanokoji and the readers relish. They also encounter a side romance we also coming from a mile away. Shinohara and Ike. I mean the love-hate thing never gets old and it is pretty fun. Ike was about to confess his love for Shinohara but alas it seems like they have to go through a bit more hate to find love. Then there are the two waifus that have been gaining more and more popularity in recent times and seems like they might even leave their competition in dust. Ryu and Kakeru and Yosuke Hirata. Hirata was with Ayanokoji after the farewell ceremony. And he quite frankly told him that he didn't find girls attractive. Like at all. And I think Ayanokoji found that a bit weird. And then Mi-chan was brought up. The girl who loved Hirata all her heart. And Hirata said he wasn't attracted to her. At all. Then there was Ryuan, he did the classic Suendre move kicking Ayanokoji. Although he dodged. And he has faith in Ayanokoji. He truly believes that Ayanokoji didn't lose to Sakyongi even though the results say different. He was even pissed that Ayanokoji would proclaim himself as someone lower. He believes that Ayanokoji could never lose to anyone, but he still wants to have this last fight with him because he has found himself growing stronger. Something he thought impossible before. There is also this new girl Matsushita who is more smarter than she looks and seems to be the only clear-headed person in the class who has suspicions regarding Ayanokoji's abilities. They also have talk when she follows Ayanokoji while he talks to Tsukishiro. The talk between Ayanokoji and Tsukishiro is brief but it does show that Tsukishiro is quite the sneaky smart type. He seemed a bit overbearing at first but he can also seem like just a pawn of Ayanokoji's father in a snap of a finger. He is quite flexible. And just as expected the talk with Ayanokoji results in him being able to confuse Matsushita. But he just drops the false information onto Matsushita that he likes Kei. Now onto the most important development with the most beloved Gyaru, Mou, saying waifu, Kurosawa Kei. Kei was pretty pissed with Ayanokoji, she had been jealous to see him hanging out with Hiriori and when he called her out again out of the blue in his room and that tugged at her heart. And that was deliberately done by Ayanokoji. He even messed around the bush when Kei came into his room and tormented her by talking about the things with Hiriori and Matsumoshi. Kei's hurt went full Moe mood. And just as Kei was about to leave lying about going to have an enjoyable time with friends, Ayanokoji decided to cut to the chase and tell the truth. That he only went on a coffee with Hiriori to make her jealous. And that he wanted to go out with Kurosawa Kei. To date her. And Kei's heart went in override. She was absolutely flabbergasted. It was very cute, her asking what exactly he meant by that. And he did say he liked Kurosawa Kei and we do know from about volume 7 that Kei absolutely loves Ayanokoji. It was surprising to see that ship sail so quick and it was a very happy moment for me. And then I became even happier when it was shown that, no, Ayanokoji was still a sociopath with an unmovable heart. That he didn't exactly like Kei but was going to use her for the sake of his own knowledge. I mean that's the best we can get with any ship in this series to be honest. Ayanokoji hasn't had a particular episode that has made him have a change of heart, nor does he seem like the character whose personality will change easily. If he had changed so easily, with a lot more volumes to go through, it would have been a problem plot-wise speaking. I mean I have talked about Ayanokoji's possible character development in the future in one of my videos that I would like you to check out. But the scene with Kei gave me giddiness while the scene with Ayanokoji holding her in his hands while thinking if he could ever feel the same, or in fact any emotions, gave me chills.